And this photograph, discovered by police, would lead a heartbroken family to their loved one, missing for almost 40 years.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at 50 of the scariest and most disturbing pictures that are associated with famous true crimes.
For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself.
Jonestown drug vials.
He said, well, we gotta go. We gotta get out of here. We gotta go to sleep. Get the solution together.
If we can't live in peace, then let's die in peace.
What you see here are various vials of drugs, including Valium, that were found inside the Jonestown complex back in 1978. On November 18th of that year, over 900 members of the People's Temple died in a massacre at Jonestown, a remote settlement in Guyana. After U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan was killed during an investigative visit, cult leader Jim Jones ordered his followers to drink a deadly concoction of Flavor Aid laced with cyanide, sedatives like Valium and chloral hydrate. Infants and children were poisoned first, followed by adults who drank the mixture either voluntarily or under coercion. Within hours, nearly 1,000 lay dead, the result of these tiny little glass bottles.
My son was dead and he was frothing at the mouth. You know, cyanide makes people froth at the mouth. My wife died in my arms, and my dead baby son was in her arms, and I held her and said, I love you, because that's all I could say. It was like...
Patty Hearst inside the bank.
They bust in, they start swearing at everybody get down on the ground, and guess what? Patty Hearst is right in the middle of things.
On February 4th, 1974, Patty Hearst, the heiress of newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst, was kidnapped by the far-left militant group Symbionese Liberation Army. 2 months later, on April 15th, Hearst was captured on security footage participating in a robbery at San Francisco's Hibernia Bank. Armed with a carbine, she certainly looked the part and helped her kidnappers steal over $10,000 in cash. The bank robbery shocked the country, fueling intense debate over whether she had been brainwashed by the group or had willingly embraced her captors' radical cause. In fact, it's still hotly debated to this day. She was given 7 years in prison for the robbery, her sentence being commuted by Jimmy Carter.
Not like now where we have cameras on everything. There are sort of quick still camera shots of her and the others pulling guns to scare folks and to get out of there, and they do.
The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum.
The theft is the largest unsolved art theft in history, as well as the largest theft of property in America.
One of the most famous heists in American history. Boston's Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum was robbed on March 18, 1990. 2 men disguised as police officers gained entry to the museum, and once inside, they tied up the guards and stole 13 artworks valued at over $500 million. It was and remains the most valuable art theft in history. Here we see the Dutch Room, where the thieves stole a few Rembrandt paintings. If you look closely on the right, you can see the empty frame for A Lady and Gentleman in Black lying on the ground. Despite decades of investigation by the FBI, none of the stolen art has been recovered and no arrests have been made.
The thieves travel both to the Dutch Room and the Short Gallery. The Dutch Room is where they're taking 5 important old master works, including the concert and Rembrandt's Storm on the Sea of Galilee.
The Unabomber at UC Berkeley.
Assistant professor of mathematics at the University of California, Berkeley. Kaczynski was not a popular or outgoing professor. Practically no one got to know him.
Sometimes it's hard to imagine that terrorists begin as normal people. Ted Kaczynski was born on May 22, 1942 in Chicago. A gifted child, he tested with a genius IQ and skipped multiple grades. He attended Harvard at just 16 and earned his PhD from the University of Michigan in 1967. That same year, Kaczynski became the youngest assistant professor of mathematics at the University of California, Berkeley. In this photo, the proud Kaczynski stands on the campus of Berkeley, ready to mold young minds. However, he abruptly resigned just 2 years later and withdrew from society, eventually moving to a remote cabin in Montana to live as the Unabomber. His terrorist campaign killed 3 and injured another 23.
He examined a small package with excessive postage from an H.C. Wickel, Department of Economics, San Francisco State University. The explosion was the most gruesome yet, instantly decapitating Thomas Moser.
Richard Ramirez looks out the van.
So we missed him. I was upset. How many more people are gonna die?
It's amazing how just one glance can send chills down your spine, like this photo, which shows serial killer Richard Ramirez glancing into the camera, a slight smirk on his face and a malicious gleam in his eyes. Ramirez terrorized Southern California between 1984 and 1985 as the Night Stalker, breaking into homes at night and assaulting and murdering the inhabitants. He often left satanic symbols at his crime scenes, further heightening public fear and fueling the satanic panic of the time. Ramirez was finally captured thanks to the help of some Good Samaritans, and in 1989 he was convicted of 13 murders and numerous other felonies. He died in prison in 2013 while awaiting execution.
Californians have come to know him as the Night Stalker.
Today, the search for California's Night Stalker continues.
Neighbors sat quietly staring at the house, wondering why the couple was picked out by the Night Stalker, and thanking God it wasn't them.
Ed Kemper in court.
I could kill you now pretty easily. Do some interesting things before anyone showed up. Then you'd be with me in spirit.
All serial killers are inherently scary, but when it comes to being physically terrifying, it's hard to beat Ed Kemper. As this deceptively creepy photo shows, Kemper is a beast of a man, towering over others and imposing a true sense of power. By most accounts, Kemper stood 6'9" and weighed 300 pounds during his killing spree. An absolutely horrific fact for those who had to face his wrath. He looks calm enough in this photo. Just imagine that man coming after you and doing unspeakable things to your body. Kemper has remained in prison since 1973 after being convicted of 8 murders, including that of his mother. He also murdered his grandparents in 1964, bringing his total body count to 10.
Well, now, that is the truth.
Dean Corll's boat shed.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but they correct me if I'm wrong, they buried bodies all over the place. All the way to High Island and Bolivar Peninsula, right?
High Island, some outside or at Lake Sam Houston, probably the majority in the boat shed over in Southwest Houston.
When his crimes came to light in 1973, Dean Corll was considered the worst serial killer in American history. Between 1970 and 1973, Corll abducted and murdered at least 29 teenage boys, often luring his victims with the promise of a party at his place. Corll's crimes were marked by extreme brutality. Victims were often handcuffed, gagged, and then strangled or shot. Corll and his accomplices, David Brooks and Elmer Henley, then buried 18 of the victims in his boat shed. This photo depicts the boat shed before it was excavated, its bodies hidden just beneath the surface. The murders were finally exposed in August of 1973 when Henley fatally shot Corll and confessed to the killings.
We didn't put a lot of faith in what he had to say until we got to the boat shed and opened it up and saw some bags of lime and smelled the odor of decaying flesh inside.
Samantha Koning's ransom photo.
He zip ties her hands and leads her away from the coffee stand, telling police he killed her, then left to take a cruise out of New Orleans before asking her family for ransom.
In February 2012, serial killer Israel Keyes kidnapped 18-year-old barista Samantha Koning, took her back to his house, and murdered her. He then demanded a ransom from her family and staged her body to make it appear as if she was still alive. Keyes sewed her eyelids open with fishing line, braided her hair, and applied makeup to her face. He then photographed her holding a copy of a local newspaper to make it look like a proof-of-life photo. Thankfully, this picture has never been released to the public, although a creepy reconstruction can be found online for those who are morbidly curious. His calculated plan now accomplished, Keyes dismembered and disposed of Koning's body in a lake.
We did spend a fair amount of time talking about his crimes and his offenses as well, and those times were definitely very chilling to hear him talk about what he's done.
The Masked Terrorist.
At this moment, 8 or 9 terrified living human beings are being held prisoner. The demands have been many. There is someone right now. This certainly has to be one of the guerrillas. A man with a stocking mask on his face. Weird.
One of the most reproduced photos in true crime history was taken at the 1972 Munich Olympics, when members of the Palestinian group Black September took 9 Israeli athletes and coaches hostage and killed 2 others. The crisis ended tragically at a nearby air base when all the hostages were killed during a failed rescue attempt. The most iconic image from the event shows a masked terrorist standing on the balcony of the Israeli team's quarters. Taken by a professional photographer during the media blitz, the picture became a chilling symbol of terrorism's intrusion into the supposed peace of the Olympic Games. The man's ski mask and dark clothing against the bright backdrop encapsulated global shock and the loss of innocence surrounding the modern Olympic ideal.
There's no peace at the end of this, no matter what you believe. You know this is true.
The Boston Marathon bombers.
In one video shown for the first time in court today during Jahar Tsarnaev's trial, Tsarnaev appears to be seen. He's circled there. You can see him on your screen. He's watching the marathon. The first blast goes off.
We return to the subject of terrorists being normal people for this photo of the Boston Marathon bombers. These aren't creepy monsters you'd find in a movie, but two everyday guys that literally went unnoticed until it was too late. The brothers blended in completely and freely walked the streets of the marathon without a second glance, the people around them having no idea that they were carrying homemade bombs. The photo chillingly highlights how vulnerable public spaces can be and how difficult it is to detect danger when it looks just like everyone else. Perhaps even creepier is what looks like a smirk on the face of Jahar Tsarnaev, gleeful at the idea that he's about to murder 3 people and injure hundreds more. Bailey Ullman.
The firefighter in that photo is Chris Fields. He's now retired after more than 31 years on the Oklahoma City Fire Department. Chris, thanks for being with us. And if the memories aren't too painful, I'd like you to take us back to that day 30 years ago. You were in the firehouse, as I understand it. You felt the concussion of the explosion, and you headed to the scene. You didn't wait for a dispatcher to send you. You guys headed out on your own.
There are plenty of ghastly photos out there of the Oklahoma City bombing, but none toe the line between creepy and devastating quite like Bailey Ullman. Ullman was just a baby on April 19, 1995, but she became one of the unfortunate victims of Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols. In a widely publicized photograph, firefighter Chris Fields can be seen holding Ullman in his arms as he emerges from the rubble. We can't show you the photo, but it is easily found on the internet, and it had a profound impact on the world, with Charles Porter winning the Pulitzer Prize for spot news photography. Fields suffered from PTSD after the event, but he also became good friends with Ullman's mother.
She had some other injuries, but I didn't find any signs of life, and I went across the street to an ambulance, and I told the paramedic, I have a critical infant, and I'm waiting for him to get a blanket out of the ambulance to put her on the ground because the ambulance was full. And, the next day, seeing the photo, finding out that's when the photo was taken, when I was standing there waiting for the paramedic to get a blanket.
Howard Unruh cleans his guns. On September 6, 1949, Howard Unruh, a 28-year-old veteran of World War II, carried out one of America's first modern mass shootings. And in this terrifying photo, Unruh can be seen cleaning a series of weapons, showcasing his proficient knowledge of firearms. On the morning of September 6th, Unruh walked through his Camden neighborhood and killed 13 people in about 12 minutes. His victims included children and neighbors, many of whom were chosen over petty grievances. Later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, he was deemed criminally insane and spent the rest of his life in a psychiatric institution. He died in 2009, having never repented for the massacre. In fact, his last public words were, "I'd have killed 1,000 if I had enough bullets." Boots and ashes.
They used hydrochloric acid to try to mask the identity of Bobby, and then they put his body in the culvert. They thought it would be relatively simple, but getting him there is a challenge. They leave his feet exposed, sticking out of the culvert.
One of the most infamous crimes in American history is that of Leopold and Loeb. Back in 1924, university students Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb kidnapped and murdered 14-year-old Bobby Franks in what they deemed the perfect crime. They lured Franks into a rented car, struck him with a chisel, and suffocated him. That night, they dumped his body near Wolf Lake. The next day, a worker discovered the disfigured corpse. In this horrific photo, a pair of boots lies next to a small pile of ashes. These boots belonged to Nathan Leopold and are believed to have been worn when they dumped Frank's body. And the ashes? Those are allegedly from the robe in which his body was wrapped.
We dragged the body out of the car, put the body in the robe, and carried it over to the culvert. Leopold carried the feet, I carried the head.
The Black Dahlia murder letter.
A beautiful young woman cut down in the prime of her life by this, shadowy creature. It's kind of the archetype for the kind of crime that captures the American public's attention.
After the infamous murder of Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia, several taunting letters and postcards were sent to various Los Angeles newspapers, supposedly from her killer. Big supposedly, but creepy nonetheless. One notable message seen here read, "I will give up in Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." It was assembled from block letters and mailed to the Los Angeles Examiner. Authorities investigated the letters seriously, but handwriting analysis and lack of corroborating evidence led police to believe most were hoaxes from attention seekers. Others think it came from the journalists themselves, hoping to keep the story alive and, by extension, sell more newspapers.
We want an answer. We want to know why. We want to know who. And until we do, I think there will always be an interest.
Charles Whitman's bullet hole.
This is the Department of English at the university. Someone has been shot, we believe, outside. Someone is shooting from the tower.
On August 1st, 1966, former Marine Charles Whitman carried out one of the first modern mass shootings in American history. After killing his wife and mother the night before, Whitman went to UT Austin and murdered 3 people inside the main building. He then ascended the university's clock tower and opened fire on people below, killing another 11 and wounding more than 30. Police officers ultimately stormed the tower and killed Whitman. In this remarkable photo, we see the clock tower through one of the bullet holes. It gives a horrifying perspective to the crime, the cameras serving as the point of view of the unsuspecting victims below. We can almost hear the whiz of the bullet coming from the tiniest and remote of places.
As I ran behind a car, the shot from the rifle sounded like it was almost in my ears, and I could hear the bullet ricochet. When I asked if anyone had been hit, someone said 5 people, including a little boy on a bicycle.
Richard Allen on the bridge.
Tonight, 8 years after the murders of 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German in Delphi, Indiana, we're now seeing the chilling video recorded by Libby of the final moments with their killer. Key evidence police say helped them capture and convict Richard Allen.
One of the most famous true crimes of the 2010s occurred on February 13, 2017, when Indiana teenagers Abigail Williams and Liberty German were murdered. Their bodies were found near the Monon High Bridge Trail, and law enforcement uncovered footage from German's phone following a white male walking toward them on the bridge. Still photos of the man were then widely distributed. Even creepier is an audio recording, also caught on German's phone, in which this same man can be heard saying, "Guys, down the hill." It wasn't until 2022 that this man was identified as Richard M. Allen. He was convicted of the murders and given 130 years in prison.
You hear heavy breathing and then footsteps before the voice of their killer.
The unsolved Polaroid.
On June 15, 1989, a Polaroid was found face down in a convenience store at Port St. Joe, Florida.
Back in June of 1989, a Florida citizen made the creepiest discovery of their lives in a convenience store parking lot. It was a color Polaroid depicting a young woman and a boy, both bound and gagged, and lying in the back of a van. Witnesses reported seeing a white windowless Toyota cargo van in that same parking lot shortly before the photo was found. Unfortunately, the driver has never been caught, and neither the boy nor the woman have ever been positively identified. Some, including Scotland Yard, believe it's Tara Calico, a woman from New Mexico who was kidnapped in September 1988. Regardless of who they are, the photo is haunting. The Chowchilla bus.
For this woman, stepping onto this school bus is an act of courage. Laura Yazzie Fanning was just 5 years old in kindergarten when 26 of her fellow classmates and their bus driver were kidnapped and buried alive.
This is a surprisingly little-known true crime given its scale. The Chowchilla kidnapping occurred on July 15, 1976, when 26 school children and their bus driver were abducted by 3 armed men. The kidnappers hijacked the bus, transferred the victims into 2 vans, and eventually buried them inside a moving van in a quarry. In this horrifying photograph, we see the bus sitting alone in the woods, having been abandoned by the kidnappers. The abductors planned on demanding a ransom for the release of the children, but after 16 hours underground, the driver and some of the older children managed to dig their way out, leading to everyone's rescue. The perps were soon arrested and convicted, although all 3 have since been paroled.
The victims again are reliving their terror from the past. This after the California Parole Board announced it was releasing one of the convicted kidnappers, James Schoenfeld, now 63 years old. Another kidnapper, Schoenfeld's brother, Richard, was deemed harmless and released in 2012 against the protests of the victims.
The basement of 25 Cromwell Street.
25 Cromwell Street in Gloucester has become one of the most infamous addresses in Britain. For 20 years, Fred and Rose West quenched their appetite for sex and murder inside this house of unimaginable horror.
When you think of a serial killer's dungeon, you probably think of the basement of 25 Cromwell Street. This was the Gloucester home of Fred and Rosemary West, who tormented, sexually assaulted, and murdered at least 10 young women throughout the 70s and 80s. When police uncovered the basement in 1994, they found evidence of these atrocities, along with some disturbing wall decorations. The photos are downright nauseating, the basement being dark and damp, the floor pure concrete, and the walls adorned with disturbing writings and childish drawings. We don't even want to imagine what went on down there, but the pictures certainly paint a lurid picture.
On March the 4th, 1994, police moved their search inside the house. They had a feeling that down in the dark cellar, they may uncover even more bodies.
Mary Jane Kelly.
But October would pass without a murder, and a slight sense of normality returned to Whitechapel. But the killer would strike again, and this time he would commit his most horrendous crimes so far.
Sometimes we have a tendency to romanticize Jack the Ripper, and it's hard to think of just how heinous his murders actually were. But if you need a reminder, just go look at the photo of Mary Jane Kelly. We obviously can't show it here, but suffice to say, it's one of the most nightmarish photographs in the history of true crime. What Jack did to Mary is simply unfathomable, and her extensively mutilated body was found lying in bed in 13 Miller's Court in the Spitalfields neighborhood of London. Police at the time claimed her face was hacked beyond all recognition, and that's putting it mildly. It also doesn't mention the complete evisceration of her body. There's a reason he was nicknamed the Ripper.
Please forgive me for the implication that I'm praising it, but it was Jack's masterpiece. Having done what he did in that room, I think that he could certainly take a break.
The 4chan murder post.
It says, quote, "I killed Amber Copeland. I strangled her with my hands, then a shoelace."
A controversial site, 4chan has seen its share of brutality throughout the years. One of the most notorious incidents occurred on November 5th, 2014, when an anonymous man posted a picture of what appeared to be a dead body. Accompanied with the grotesque image was the text, "Turns out it's way harder to strangle someone to death than it looks on the movies," and "She fought so damn hard." Naturally, many believed that this was a hoax, but this was no joke. Oregon man David Kallick later turned himself in for the murder of Amber Copeland, and the affidavit confirms the photo posted to 4chan matched the Copeland crime scene. Kallick was given 82 years in prison. Robert Pickton's farm.
For the families of the women brutalized and killed, Pickton's death marks the end of a traumatic chapter, even as questions about the extent of his crimes remain.
One of Canada's most notorious serial killers, Robert Pickton, was active from the late 70s to the early 2000s, and it's believed he murdered at least 26 women, although he later confessed to an undercover officer that it was actually 49. He was finally apprehended in 2002, and his British Columbia farm was subjected to an enormous search valued at $70 million. In this unsettling photo, heavy machinery is used to sift through the mountains of soil in an attempt to find human remains. It's believed that Pickton disposed of his victims at the farm, as personal items belonging to the murdered women were found on the property.
This is what's left of Robert Pickton's notorious pig farm. Remnants of the pain he caused, tributes to the women he killed.
The Son of Sam car.
"Well," he said, "you got me." Police say those words ended the biggest manhunt in New York City history with the capture of Son of Sam.
Between 1976 and 77, New York City was plagued by a mysterious killer known as the Son of Sam. He committed 8 shootings in the span of a year, killing 6 and wounding even more. His MO was brazen and unpredictable. He seemed to target strangers totally at random, often when his victims were in their cars. He would approach unexpectedly, typically on foot, and open fire without provocation. Here we see the aftermath of one of the shootings, a brown 1968 Buick Skylark with its door open. This car belonged to Robert Violante, a clothing salesman who was on a first date with secretary Stacy Moskowitz. Son of Sam approached the car from the passenger side and shot both, killing Moskowitz and blinding Violante.
It was the largest task force New York ever assembled. 100 years from now, people will still know the name Son of Sam.
John Wayne Gacy and Rosalind Carter.
His name is John Wayne Gacy, convicted of killing 33 innocent people and destroying hundreds of lives.
Some serial killers hide in plain sight. perhaps the most notorious example being John Wayne Gacy. Gacy posed as a respectable figure in his community, participating in various civic activities and serving as a precinct captain for the Democratic Party. On May 6, 1978, he met First Lady Rosalind Carter at a local political event, and an employee of the White House snapped this hair-raising photo. Gacy is seen wearing an S pin, indicating that he had undergone a background check by the Secret Service. This is especially chilling in hindsight, as Gacy had already murdered 29 men and buried them in the crawl space of his home. He would kill 4 more before being apprehended the following December.
What happened to what happened in the Vukovic case? Where was he picked up, and how did he get to the house, and what happened with him?
The Lindbergh kidnapping, one of the biggest crimes of the 20th century, occurred on March 1, 1932, when young Charles Lindbergh Jr. was kidnapped from his New Jersey home. The crime was pinned on a man named Bruno Hauptmann, but many have questioned his conviction and believe there is more to the story. The kidnapper used a homemade wooden ladder to reach the window, and this ladder was left at the scene after the kidnapping, lying in sections on the ground. In this photo, we see a recreation of the ladder and how it was used to reach the high window and abduct Lindbergh. It's a terrifying picture, showcasing vulnerability and pure human malice all at once.
It is the address and telephone number of Dr. Condon, the man who paid the ransom, written in your writing, found on a board in your closet.
The smiling Manson followers.
Are you always this happy?
Uh-huh.
What's the secret?
We found the truth.
The Manson family shocked the world in the late 1960s, killing at least 9 people and committing the infamous Tate murders of August 1969. Adding to the story's horrifying aura was the behavior of the accused while on trial. They all seemed detached from the brutal crimes they had just committed. Indeed, they were almost gleeful as they giggled and smiled in court as their crimes were recounted in graphic detail. Here we see Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Leslie Van Houten looking positively cheerful as they walk away from receiving their death sentences. This type of behavior shocked the public and seemed to exemplify the cult's disturbing mindset.
She's a convicted killer and former follower of Charles Manson and is now free after spending more than 50 years in prison.
Travis Alexander.
This is around the time where she became very possessive of him.
Very possessive. She just had to sit right by him. She didn't appreciate when he was talking to another female.
This is one of the most notorious criminal cases in recent American history, occurring on June 4, 2008. Arizona salesman Travis Alexander was murdered in his home by an ex-girlfriend named Jodi Arias, who stabbed and shot Alexander while he was taking a shower. The two had a tumultuous relationship, and Alexander's friends did not like Arias, finding her troubling and obsessive. On the evening of June 4th, Arias entered Alexander's home and made her way to the bathroom. She then snapped this final photo of Alexander, just moments before she viciously stabbed him to death. It's certainly a haunting photo, his eyes emitting what looks like intense fear.
That leaves her left hand free. Could she have had the knife in her hand at that moment?
BTK.
You will find a homicide in 43 South Pershing,
Dennis Rader is a famous serial killer, better known by the acronym BTK. He terrorized the Wichita area between 1974 and 1991, murdering at least 10 individuals. One of Rader's disturbing hobbies was dressing up in women's clothing, sometimes those of his victims, and often in connection with depraved elements of sexual gratification. He would sometimes wear masks and wigs to further fulfill these fantasies. For example, here we see a nightmarish photo of Rader dressed in what appears to be female garments and donning both a blonde wig and a clown mask. Psychologists often link this kind of behavior to issues of power, suggesting that his dressing up, much like his killings, was just another way to dominate and degrade his victims.
Sure, you like it. Because I was trying to catch you.
The Beast of Jersey mask.
Here's the plan, Sandins. You have until our provisions arrive, provisions which will help us break into your elegant home.
A little-known but deeply disturbing case occurred between 1957 and 1971 on the island of Jersey. This is an island country in Europe, found just off the northwest coast of France. A man named Edward Pasnell was a notorious serial predator who terrorized the small island, committing numerous home invasions and assaulting the women inside. His appearance resulted in his nickname, the Beast of Jersey, as he wore a grotesque and frightening mask made of rubber while committing his crimes. It looked somewhat like a disfigured and monstrous face, adding to the general horror of his crime spree. Pasnell was eventually caught in 1971 and given 30 years in prison.
Why are you doing this to us? Because you were home.
The Zodiac Letter.
To prove I killed them, I shall state some facts which only I and the police know.
Perhaps the most famous aspect of a true crime case, the Zodiac Letters are an enduring part of American history, having been referenced in literature and film for decades. Here we see a copy of one, addressed to Melvin Belli and sitting on the desk of Lieutenant Charles Ellis of the San Francisco Police Department. Belli was a prominent lawyer who had many famous clients, including Jack Ruby, the killer of Lee Harvey Oswald. The Zodiac mailed the Belli letter on December 20th, 1969. Inside was a desperate plea for help and a swatch of bloody clothing belonging to a victim named Paul Stein. Stein was the Zodiac's final confirmed victim, his death occurring on October 11th, just 2 months before this letter was sent.
This is the Zodiac speaking. I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington Street and Maple Street last night. To prove this, here is a blood-stained piece of his shirt. I am the same.
Salah Abdeslam. On November 14, 2015, 2 men were captured on camera walking near a French gas station. One was wearing a black jacket and walking with his hands in his pockets.
These pictures were taken a day later at a Belgian petrol station.
The photo doesn't look like much, but it becomes terrifying once the context becomes clear. The man in the black jacket is terrorist Salah Abdeslam, and he had just helped commit a series of attacks in Paris.
The morning after the attacks, he's seen on surveillance video in northern France.
Occurring the night before the photo was taken. The coordinated attacks killed 130 people and injured more than 400. Abdeslam was the only perpetrator to survive, and he called his friends to pick him up. They did so, and Abdeslam was captured on camera while fleeing the country. He was later captured and sentenced to life in prison.
The next day, he's seen at a petrol station in France, waved through a border check into Belgium.
Christopher Wilder. Throughout a period of 6 weeks in 1984, Christopher Wilder embarked on a cross-country trip from Florida to California.
It was the beginning of a string of brutal and terrifying murders that spread out across the country.
Along the way, he abducted and sexually assaulted at least 12 individuals. He's also been linked to 8 murders, although the true number is likely higher. On April 1st, Wilder attended a fashion show in Las Vegas hosted by 17 magazine. In one picture taken on that fateful day, Wilder can be seen sitting in the background, wearing white pants and a dark jacket.
And who's directly beyond her, about 20 feet away, looking at her with what I call the look of a homicidal maniac, none other than Christopher Wilder.
An aspiring model named Michelle Korfman would disappear from this event, and her body was found 1 month later near a rest stop. Her death was later linked to Christopher Wilder, who had abducted her from the fashion show.
They announced the placement of Christopher Wilder on its famed 10 Most Wanted Fugitives list.
Death masks. Found in the Cleveland Police Museum are a series of death masks hanging on the wall. It's an unbelievably eerie sight. Not only is the concept of human heads hanging on a wall disturbing, but the death masks look eerily realistic. These grotesque decorations date back to the 1930s, when they were made in the midst of the city's most infamous killing spree.
The victims often went unidentified. The killer always escaped undetected.
The still unidentified Cleveland torso murderer killed at least 13 people between 1934 and 1938. Because most of the victims were transients, it was very difficult to identify them, especially considering what happened to their bodies.
In February 1937, the torso of another unidentified woman washed up on the shores of Lake Erie.
Enter these plaster death masks of the victims, which were displayed to the public in the hopes of someone recognizing their faces. Tyler Hadley's party. 2 young men pose for the camera, one of whom is holding a drink. That man is Tyler Hadley, and he had just killed his parents. In fact, their bodies were still upstairs.
Tyler Hadley and Michael Mandel took this picture Saturday night. It was the last picture Mandel thought he'd ever take with his best friend.
Hadley killed his mother and father earlier in the day, hid their bodies in the master bedroom, then used their credit cards to fund a party that dozens of people attended. The other man in the photo is Michael Mandel. Hadley told Mandel of the crime, and Mandel even found the bodies in the bedroom. Regardless, he stayed at the party and even took this selfie with Hadley. It wasn't until Mandel had left the party hours later that he reported the crime to the authorities.
After I found his parents, I knew it was going to be the last time I seen him. This is that look on his face. You could see the horror in his face.
John Edward Robinson holding Tiffany Stacy. The photo is of poor quality, but the content is clear. A happy group of people are centered around a man wearing a yellow sweater. This man is holding a very young baby who is adorably dressed in white. But that baby is not his own. In fact, he killed the baby's mother and stole her. The man is serial killer John Edward Robinson, who took the lives of at least 8 people. He befriended a young mother named Lisa Stacy, killed her, and took her young daughter Tiffany, later posing for this photo.
She disappeared. Forever.
He then sold Tiffany to his brother and sister-in-law, who quote-unquote adopted her, for $5,500 in quote-unquote legal fees. It would be 15 years before Tiffany Stacy learned of her true identity.
Justice and closure for me is finding her remains and giving her a proper burial.
The Sean Moore crime scene. A child's bicycle lies abandoned on the roadside while a police officer speaks to witnesses in the background. This is a startlingly great picture, conveying a primal sense of fear and danger and letting you know that something is definitely not right. This bike belongs to Sean Moore, who was riding home from a convenience store when he was forcibly abducted by Ronald Bailey. The bike was left behind, a painful reminder of Moore's interrupted life. Bailey took Moore to a secluded cabin where he proceeded to drug, assault, and eventually kill him. Bailey was later found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping and sentenced to life in prison. The Mad Bomber of New York. Everything about George Metesky is terrifying. Throughout the 1940s and 50s, Metesky earned the moniker the Mad Bomber, as he planted explosives in many public areas around New York. While these bombings never killed anyone, they left 15 people injured. Metesky was finally identified and caught in 1957 and taken to the Waterbury Police Headquarters. A photographer took a picture of Metesky inside his jail cell, and the result is absolutely blood-chilling. Metesky glances out of his cell, a gleeful smile plastered on his face, and his eyes depicting a complete loss of reality. Metesky was found legally insane, with the judge calling him, quote, hopeless and incurable both mentally and physically. James Bulger. This famous photograph depicts James Bulger, who is walking through a mall and holding the hand of an older boy. Another boy wearing a darker jacket walks in front. These two are Robert Thompson and John Venables, and they are in the process of discreetly kidnapping Bulger. The young boy was shopping with his mother at the New Strand shopping center when she briefly took her eyes off him to pay for some groceries.
It was just a split second, and I think that's going to live with me for the rest of my life.
It was then that Thompson and Venables swooped in and guided Bulger away by hand. His body was found 2 days later near some railway tracks. A man, his daughter, and a car bomb. For a period of about 30 years, Northern Ireland was embroiled in a political conflict known as the Troubles. This ended with the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. But this ceasefire was not honored by a splinter group of the Irish Republican Army called the Real IRA. As a form of protest, they planted a car bomb in the town of Omagh.
A bomb has exploded in the center of Omagh, and there are reports that a number of people have been killed.
It went off on August 15, 1998, killing 29 and injuring hundreds. In this photograph, taken shortly before the bombing, a man in a yellow sweater holds a child on his shoulders. Right beside them is the red car in which the bomb was planted. Both the man and the child survived, but the photographer was one of the 29 fatalities.
About 100 people have been injured. It's the worst bomb attack in 30 years of terrorism in the province.
Regina Kay Walters. It's one of the most visceral photos in true crime. A girl wearing a black dress holds her hands towards the camera. An obvious defensive gesture that elicits great fear of whoever is behind the camera. That whoever was a man named Robert Ben Rhodes, who may have killed more than 50 women while working as a truck driver. He took this haunting snapshot of Walters shortly before strangling her to death, and Walters' decomposing body was later found on the same farm depicted in the image.
When I saw those photos, I said, this is Regina Walters.
The photo was later found by investigators in Rhodes's house. If it's any consolation, it was Walters' death for which Rhodes was convicted and finally put away.
Rhodes was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Leonard Lake's cabin. This photo is quite unassuming at first. It's an aerial shot of a rubble-strewn building with various crew members working amongst the debris. It's a sight that millions of people see every day on their way to and from work. But this is actually the compound of Leonard Lake, and it hosted some nightmarish atrocities. Lake and his accomplice, Charles Ng, took their victims to this cabin in the Sierra Nevada foothills and committed horrible acts against them before ending their lives. It's believed that the duo killed up to 25 people inside the cabin, and authorities later found the likes of videotapes and human remains at the site. Cherie Miller. In July of 1984, a man named William Bradford met young bartender Cherie Miller at the meat market in Los Angeles. After convincing Miller that he was a professional photographer, he extended a proposition to take some photos of her. She agreed, and the two drove north into the desert of California. Bradford took various photographs of Miller, who can be seen wearing a pair of denim shorts. Soon after the photos were taken, Bradford killed Miller and took her body back to Hollywood, where he abandoned it in an alley. Bradford was a predator who was out on bail at the time of Miller's killing. She was just one of a potential 28 victims. Dahmer's drum. It's amazing how a story can recontextualize a picture. This seemingly harmless photo depicts a blue plastic drum in the corner of an old room. Nothing too strange or malicious, until you realize what's inside the vat. It belonged to Jeffrey Dahmer, who was probably the most notorious serial killer in American history. One of Dahmer's survivors took note of the drum while inside the house and noticed a very strong and unpleasant smell coming from it. When Dahmer was finally caught, investigators uncovered the drum and found it was filled with hydrochloric acid and human remains. Dahmer was going full Breaking Bad and dissolving his victims inside the drum. John Lennon and Mark David Chapman. A very famous photo taken by Paul Goresh shows John Lennon signing an autograph while a man in glasses stands over his left shoulder. Thousands of photos just like this were taken throughout Lennon's career, but this one is steeped in malice. This photo was taken around 5 p.m. on the evening of December 8, 1980. Nearly 6 hours later, Lennon returned home and was shot by the man in the photo.
Lennon was shot and killed at about 11 o'clock last night outside his apartment building.
The very same man he had given an autograph to earlier in the evening. This, of course, is Mark David Chapman, and he had been planning to kill Lennon for months. While Chapman watched Lennon sign his album, he knew he would kill him just a few hours later. Karen Sprinker.
Here's 5-year-old Jerome Brudos. He finds this pair of women's shoes. Something had made him pick those up.
Throughout the late 1960s, a man named Jerry Brudos killed at least 4 women in Oregon.
So he brings home this pair of women's shoes, and he begins to wear them around the house.
One of them was an 18-year-old named Karen Sprinker. On March 27, 1969, Brudos was wearing women's clothing and scoured a department store parking lot for victims. He found Sprinker and kidnapped her at gunpoint.
She was beautiful. I said I'd take some photos of her.
Is that when you invited her in?
Brudos then took her to his personal garage and made her put on underwear while he took photos. One of them has been released and shows a calm-looking Sprinker gazing into the lens. Shortly after the photo was taken, Brudos killed Sprinker and put her body into the Willamette River. Ted's tools. Few serial killers are as notorious as Ted Bundy. His name is synonymous with evil, and he may have killed up to 36 women throughout the mid-70s.
While detectives tried to track a man who slipped into a sorority house early yesterday and murdered 2 women.
The killer struck first at the Chi Omega sorority house. Police say he was armed with a heavy oak log.
Bundy was arrested in the early morning of August 16, 1975 by patrolman Bob Hayward, and when Hayward searched Bundy's vehicle, he discovered a treasure trove of suspicious material. Inside the Volkswagen Beetle, and later photographed for the world to see, were the likes of garbage bags, an ice pick, rope, gloves, a ski mask, and more. Unfortunately, there wasn't enough solid evidence to hold Bundy at the time, and he was promptly released from custody.
Washington missed you. Utah gave you away. Colorado lost you. I'm gonna fry you.
He went on to kill again before he was finally captured for good in February of 1978. The Columbine class picture. It's pictures like this that prove the volatility of life. You never know the types of people you're literally sitting beside.
Parents, hug your kids. Pray that, be happy that you're with them. Kids, grab your friends, hold them tight, and never be mad at people because it could happen in a second that they'll be gone.
This photo shows the Columbine High School class of 1999. In the top left corner, some boys can be seen making gun gestures with their hands. Two of these boys are Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, who just weeks later would enact the historic Columbine attack. On April 20th, 1999, Harris and Klebold killed 13 at their high school. The perps would also take their own lives, bringing the total body count to 15. Even more were injured, and Columbine became an international talking point. Rodney Alcala's photos. A vicious man who killed at least 8. Rodney Alcala is famously known as the dating game killer, as he once appeared on the titular game show.
Between takes, you might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome.
While searching his home and his personal storage locker, investigators found over 1,000 photographs, many of which depicted people in sensual poses. 120 of these photos were eventually released to the public in the hopes of identifying the subjects. The released photographs are not explicitly sensual in nature, but merely depicts people, mainly young women, posing in artful manners.
The San Antonio police refused to take a missing persons report on Chris because she was an adult.
It's unclear how many of these subjects were killed by Alcala, but at least one missing persons case, that of 28-year-old Christine Thornton, was solved with the help of the photographs.
Her smile shared by a tragic list of young women and girls who trusted a charming stranger, only to discover a dark secret that began back in the fall of 1968.
A message from the lipstick killer.
Later that morning in the bedroom, police found a crumpled-up ransom note left by the culprit. It read, "Get $20,000 ready and wait for word. Do not notify FBI or police. Bills in 5s and 10s."
While his conviction is controversial, the lipstick killer is thought to be Illinois criminal William Herons. The lipstick killer got his name from a particularly creepy crime scene, and this crime scene was famously photographed. Frances Brown was killed inside her apartment, and the perp left behind a message for whoever came across her body. Scrawled on the wall in lipstick were the words, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." Unfortunately, the killer did indeed strike again, kidnapping and taking the life of the young Suzanne Degnan. This occurred just 1 month after the death of Brown. Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into Settings and switch on your notifications. Ed Gein's house. The inspiration behind numerous fictional killers like Norman Bates and Leatherface, Ed Gein is a notorious body snatcher who fashioned himself one nightmarish house. Gein would dig up corpses from graveyards around Plainfield, Wisconsin, and use their bones and skin to make household objects. When authorities searched Gein's house, they found the likes of garbage bins, upholstery, bedposts, bowls, and lampshades, all of which were made from human remains. Many photos were taken of Gein's house, most of which depict a horribly cluttered space filled with trash and furniture. It's eerie to think how much of that stuff was made out of the recently exhumed. Perhaps the scariest picture is that of a chair upholstered with old and leathery-looking skin. Do these photos give you the creeps? Let us know in the comments below.